Hey y'all. Thank you to all of you who have liked and subscribed to the channel. I just want to thank you. I don't want any of you to think that that has gone unappreciated. But anyway, I am back for another review of Netflix Ladies First, a story of women in hip hop. What are they up against? Episode 2. Now this was a good one. This is the kind of controversial stuff I expected. Um, so I'm just coming back from a happy hour, so forgive me. But I did take my notes. So part one is a man's world, right? So they start by talking about the misogyny in hip hop. The hatred of women, the objectification of women, the exploitation of women, which we all know is a segment of our larger society. We know it's not just in hip hop. But one woman talks about how the misogyny was always there, and she was like, and people loved it, and they still do. Well, rap music is still popular, you know? So when Salt and Pepper were asked, they show a clip of an interview, and they were asked if male rappers were sexist, they said yes without like a second thought. And they were very clear. And that was in the 90s. So then we get these two rappers named Kim and China. I had never heard of them. Um, so they were saying that the men have always wanted to be in control of women, particularly in hip hop. And another issue of misogyny, and also a huge vestige of slavery, and even a continuing characteristic of patriarchy, is the need to control women, and in this case, black men controlling black women's bodies. We've seen this. Now we know white men do this on a whole nother level, a much higher, a much more powerful level, okay? Because they make laws, okay? They don't simply make rap videos. They prevent women from getting abortions. They make birth control expensive. Meanwhile, Viagra is free under most healthcare plans across this country. Catch, okay? But black men's need to control some aspect of society, I feel like, is because they can't control most other people in society, and they feel powerless. And I think that's a problem. And that lets you know how powerless black women are, because that's who they choose to dominate. And, as one scholar has written about, and his name escapes me, he even says, gay men are not exempt from that kind of behavior. So even in those segments, he makes the point, and he's a gay man, but he was like, they can also dominate women physically and still carry out the sort of misogyny. Anyway, but I say that is a problem for obvious reasons. Um, but this is particularly a habit of black men with adult black women, and children in large part, but children up to a point. So I remember seeing a documentary in my time at Spelman. Spelman's going to come up a lot in this one, where a professor had made this documentary where she just let the lyrics of certain songs play, and took clips of black movies like Baby Boy and stuff like that to show how violence against black women in movies, usually followed by sex, essentially help normalize black misogyny and heterosexual violence against women, like rape. And I remember, and just like when I saw that documentary as a sophomore in college at Spelman, the shock factor when I was rewatching some of those videos and things like that, with this part of the series, it hit me again. Because sometimes, you take breaks. Like, I don't watch music videos anymore. I just listen to music. I mean, I was watching videos when Beyonce did the visual album, because it was Beyonce doing a visual album on her self-titled album and Lemonade. But that part of who I was in terms of watching music videos, so that died after my high school graduation, when I had no business watching it. And yes, my mom would come in the room and be like, cut this crap off. So I knew it was wrong. I knew I wasn't allowed to watch it, okay? But sometimes when you see it played again after taking a break, or not listening to certain kind of lyrics as often, it reminds you really of how, like, you go, what the fuck was this? What the hell was I listening to? So they showed parts of the infamous tip drill video. And anybody, well, maybe, I mean, it's someone small, but okay, so let me give my piece on this. The tip drill video. No, I was not a student at Spelman when that happened, okay, when the boycott against Nelly happened. I entered Spelman College in 2006, graduated in 2010. Okay. So I wasn't there for when they boycotted Nelly. I do know, however, because you know stories like this get passed down, but also, being from the area, I do know, however, the students at Spelman asked him, Nelly, after doing a tip drill video, which is an incredibly degrading video, which they show a piece of, asked him to sit down on a panel if he wanted to come and have his bone marrow drive on Spelman's campus. And he refused to sit down with Spelman students to talk about why he thought this was acceptable behavior and why he made the kind of music that he made. Right? Now, honestly, to me, if this is really about bone marrow, having a bone marrow drive, to me, that's a small price to pay, especially when you had a sister that was dealing with it, so on and so forth. And even when I look back on it, I just think pragmatically, it didn't make sense for him to try to hold it at Spelman. I don't know how much y'all know, but Spelman is a very small, selective liberal arts college for women. That's historically black. So the only thing I could think was, why not Emory or Morehouse or Clark Atlanta, hell, Lenox Square, all the places in Atlanta would have been better. In terms, if you think about access to people knowing about it, he wanted to eat off the name because it had been associated with, very smart, beautiful black women who were competent, so on and so forth. But you can't take without giving. They asked you to have a conversation. That's it. All right. So, but to think you can disrespect black women that way in videos, degrade them, and then demand to host something on a college campus of young black women, okay, and administrators who by and large are mostly African American women, and demand that you have the right to host it, he would have never done that to white women or white people or anybody else. He would not have done it. I can guarantee you that. He would have never tried to go to Wellesley, which is, a majority white college for women, Scripps, Smith College. He would have never done that shit there or tried it. So then, and I'm going to tell you why I have a bigger issue with it, because he doubled down nearly a decade later, okay? When he was talking to Mark Lamont Hill around 2013 or so, or 2014, 2015, somewhere in there. He doubled down talking to Mark Lamont Hill on the Huffington Post, on his web show. And he asked him, again, about the incident at Spelman, if there was anything, now it being about a decade later. And he made that point. He said, is there anything you would have done differently, though? Now considering that you had 10 years to think about and things have happened. Nelly said, I probably would have kicked somebody's ass. That was his response 10 years later. After losing his sister to death, nearly a decade of time had passed, and your response is to threaten violence against black women at Spelman. Still, you're mad at them for your failure because they wouldn't allow their campus where they pay tuition and where we uplift black women. I'm not saying we don't fall short with each other, but that's not what we're in school to do. And then you act like we did something to you. Fuck you. Anyway, so I'm just letting y'all know that, this misogyny stuff is real and it carries way outside of these music videos. So KRS-One, the rapper, had a line in one of his songs about Roxanne Shante, and he said she's only good for steady fucking. And this was in 1988, which to me was outrageous because I just remember from the episode 1 that she was like 15, 14 years old when she started and, still a teenager. Then they show a picture of her. You can see this girl with braces, okay? Braces in like a ponytail, all right? And it's not like now where you see adults with braces. No, not in the 80s. So, one, this sounded crazy to me because she was 15, okay? So this should be statutory rape and pedophilia at the least. And he was a grown man. And to objectify a teenage girl that way is so disgraceful, and to me meant that there should have been larger outrage in our communities, much larger. And the only reason why we have the cognition we have now around Me Too with Tarana Burke, so on and so forth, is because people push unpopular opinions. It's not because we magically woke up. You have to stick with it and stay with it. I'm glad it's happening, but when I hear about these things, it irks me because hell, we're only talking about Roxanne Shante because she's one of the pioneers of hip hop. You know how many other girls this happened to? You know what I mean? Like that kind of shit. Um, and so the woman was like, well, KRS-One wasn't the only one who said it. She was like, we all did. This is the commentator. And she was like, because we repeated these lyrics again and again and again. And that was a really good point because that works to normalize things in a particular culture. And I know there was a relatively small yet strong group of African Americans, including ministers, who were against this kind of music. But people really drowned out their voices and tried to silence them, even within the community. And that to me is the more disgraceful part. So Roxanne Shante was interviewed and said that she was so grateful for the kind of mother that she had. She said she was like, if she didn't have her mom who had taught her how to brush things off, mind you, she's 14 or 15 years old when this happens, and to know how to keep moving, she said, I wouldn't have been able to deal with those things in the music industry. I guess not at fucking 15. Hell, so she makes a diss record back to KRS-One, essentially defending herself, her 15-year-old young girl self, and not disrespecting him nearly on the level he disrespected her. And that shit really pissed me off and rubbed me the fucking wrong way. Because when people talk about KRS-One, they talk about him like he is the greatest legend. Fuck you. So we get Yo-Yo, all right? 1991. So I heard about Yo-Yo for the first time, and I'm embarrassed to say this, on Love and Hip Hop LA. I know these are people I should know, but like I said, I'm more of an R&B neo-soul kind of chick. So, look, I listen to some rap songs that I like and stuff like that, but that's not my thing. So she was from Cali, lived in Watts, Compton, and apparently she caught her boyfriend cheating on her in the 6th grade. Now, what does cheating look like in the 6th grade in 1991? Never mind. I'm not going to even go there. So she wrote a rap about it, okay? And she said then that she entered talent shows in high school. She won a bunch of them, and they were called, the Def City Girls. And she was discovered really by Ice Cube. I shouldn't say discovered, but she existed before. But like he's the one who gave her an opportunity. So Ice Cube heard about her, and he came to her mom's house to get her on board. And she said she was scared because he was in NWA, and they did bitch is a bitch, hoe is a hoe, I'm not the one. And her mother wasn't really feeling it. She said, she was kind of looking at it as her opportunity. But I think it's good when a parent is like questioning, like, I don't give a shit about this money and this fame shit. Like, no. But anyway, she eventually let her do that. And we know that Dre, certainly lived by the rhymes that NWA was producing. And Yo-Yo and Miss Chalet, is it just me or do they kind of favor? I was kind of worried for her. I don't know how the rest of the story is going to turn out. But I imagine the black community being as small as it was and is in LA, and the music community and then the black music community, people had to know about Dre's abuse to Miss Chalet. And that couldn't have been just, the NWA members. There's a lot of, conspirators in this. It really is. So she said at the time she started, hip-hop was so male-dominated. She was like, most women felt like they needed a male group to get started. And she was like, honestly, I did. And they kept showing it. There was usually a first lady of every label. And they went through it. And they were like, there could only be one woman in the group. So we saw that with Eve. We saw that with Yo-Yo. We saw that with Lil' Kim. We saw it, Nicki Minaj. Olivia with G-Unit. We saw that over and over again. So MC Lyte said she couldn't even get on covers a lot, like covers for like magazines and things like that. They wanted her to be, if she got on the front, she needed to be with a man, and she wanted to be without one. Like, yeah, she's making dope rhymes and shit, and making a way for women and so on and so forth. But then they bring in Remy Ma, and she's talking about how you have to develop basically the I don't give a fuck attitude. Because women, have to compete against each other, and that they had to take a lot. And she was like, so you're battling other chicks for the space to be in a rap game, and then there's all the other things that come with being a woman, and we all know there's only position for one on the label. She was like, so then you get labeled as a bitch, or she's stuck up, or she's hard to work with, which is basically the same shit that most black women who stand up for themselves get labeled as at work. Okay, so this is a another aspect of our lives. So Yo-Yo was like, she told Ice Cube, "You never get to call me a bitch." She said, and he tried. She said she put it in the lyrics, and he was like, "Well, I don't mean it like that." And she was like, "No." She said, so he changed it. She said, but he did try it at one time. So then we get Rod Digger, and I remember Rod Digger. She she gives us her backstory, and that's what I really like, getting people's backstory to kind of figure out how they end up where they are. And she was like, her parents instilled in her that she was a little black girl, and she should always be proud of that. So she said she went through life thinking she was the shit, and all I could do was laugh. So she was like, I excelled like in math and science. She said, I wanted to work with NASA, and I was like, yeah, your parents were on top of it, because for that to be a little black girl's dream was very telling in terms of what they were exposing her to, right? She went to college for engineering. She said she had already started and everything and had done it. She said, but she just decided to go into music. So she worked under Busta Rhymes, and Rodriguez said that I always wrote all of my own rhymes. She said, and people always tried to give the credit to some male rapper if she had the best lines. And so they, were even showing like old footage of her like, nope, I write all my own stuff. Nobody else is writing my stuff. So now I, as an individual, and I am obviously the beneficiary of black feminism and the pioneering black feminists of the late 70s, early 80s, like bell hooks and stuff, and the black women who blazed those trails before me. So I'm sitting here believing everything that these people are saying, but also knowing better. Like, you had to know that these women had brains. What the fuck? When you found them, the reason why you wanted them is because they was killing it. And then I was also sitting there like, I know better. And I think black men know it too. Like, that black women always end up doing better work. And then, on top of that, most, if not all of the work, and then they get the credit. Men get the credit. We've seen this in society. Hell, I saw that just being like a student at Spelman and dealing with the Morehouse students. The Spelman girls always did all the work because we cared about whatever issue it was. And then they come in and want to make a speech. Child, don't get me started. Anyway, so I told you it's going to be a lot of those references this time around. So part 2, the double standard. So they talk about Lil' Kim and Foxy Brown in 1996. And how Lil' Kim changed the game, talking about her sexuality and being more feminine on stage. And feminine, I use that loosely, but nevertheless, I get the point. So she did change the game because most rappers before her were very tomboyish, and they felt like they had to be. And they probably did, So Lil' Kim's bops, when they started playing her songs back, I was like, damn, I forgot how good this shit was. Anyway, so they talk about Foxy Brown brought something different too with her sexuality. But she was a teenager and had an album called The Il Nana. And I remember hearing that on the radio, but not knowing what it was. And, a euphemism for vagina, as her debut album. She's a teenager. So she's under Jay-Z. And I had heard, rumors about this stuff. Under Jay-Z, a male rapper. I mean, Beyonce was young when she met Jay-Z too. However, she was under Jay-Z, a male rapper. And she was a fucking teenager. And Lil' Kim was still young, but she was grown. And this was being played on mainstream radio. This teenage girl talking about her vagina. So I'm just like, and all I can think now that I, know better. I mean, in 96, I was like, what, 4th grade or something? Anyway, young but grown. But anyway, all I can think now is the adultification of black girls and its danger. Just because, we've seen like the Surviving R. Kelly series, the adultification of Aaliyah, and it's scary. And a side eye to all the people who thought it was okay to promote this fucking album, and side eye to the people who fucking produced it. Anyway, so the problem became that Lil' Kim and Foxy Brown embraced their femininity and their sexuality. And not for the reasons I just mentioned, like, I don't know, Foxy Brown being underage. No. Then they had this white woman journalist who says, well, as soon as a woman does that, she's labeled hypersexual. At least back then. Now we call it sex positive. No, bitch. No. Black women are still called and treated as hypersexual. Okay? White women get to call themselves sex positive and be respected in the media as a result and elsewhere. And as Little Kim pointed out, what the fuck is the difference between me and Madonna? Madonna's female empowerment and Little Kim is treated like a hoe bitch off the street. And she's writing her own lyrics and rhymes and pulling in money left and right for Bad Boy and for herself. Right. All right, then we have this talk show host whose name I don't know, her face looks familiar, reading Lil Kim's lyrics out loud, and then a white man is sitting beside Lil Kim on, those talk shows from the 90s, chastising her, saying the only difference between your calendar and a porn calendar is that you have clothes on. Yeah, bitch, that's a big fucking difference, actually. What the fuck? Get the fuck out of here. I mean, she handled it well, but she looked like she kind of had that nervous smile. Like, I don't really know what to say. I don't really want to fight. And, that kind of thing. And just when I wish people would, like, swoop down and, sometimes just help somebody. Because Lil' Kim was still young. I mean, she was grown, but she was young. So then there was an article by the publication paper entitled Hardcore Honey. Bell Hooks goes on the down low with Lil' Kim. And Bell Hooks, of course, being a pioneering black feminist, Bell Hooks said what was worse than Lil' Kim's lyrics in that article she talks about are the puritanical repressive voices that try to silence her. That's worse. The fact that you feel like you can dictate how she should use her body. God rest her soul. We know she died at the end of 2020. I wish she would have taken Bell Hooks, knowing what she knows about the history of black women's hypersexuality, or treated as such. I wish she would have taken the same approach in the late 20-teens with Beyonce and Nicki when she was, shaming them, basically saying, oh yeah, if you feel like you can do whatever with your body, that you'll get paid, and that's a bad example for little black girls. And granted, people can grow to different kinds of thinking, but my point is, I don't think Nicki and Beyonce have to go and view themselves through the lens of how white people have historically oppressed us through. That's all I'm gonna say. All right. So anyway, then they start talking about WAP. All right, Cardi B and Meg Thee Stallion. So, and shout out to Meg Thee Stallion. I'm not crazy about her music, but I stand with her, and I hope this brings you some relief and some justice that he's been sentenced. Yeah. So people were going in on them, and I do remember hearing about this, going in on Cardi B and Meg for talking about their sexuality in that way. Then you have clips of an interview where Snoop Dogg is talking shit about WAP and saying that they need to keep some things a secret, and essentially their vagina is the jewel of the Nile. Sir, you are so far out of fucking order, I don't even know where to begin. Your name is not Pastor Snoop. It ain't Reverend Snoop. It ain't Rabbi Snoop. It ain't Imam Snoop. Slow your motherfucking roll. I said he got his motherfucking nerve. I could have respected it a bit more if he would have said, I understand, because when I was young, I used to think like that about a lot of stuff and so forth. Okay, but see, he didn't. He didn't. Okay? Isn't he the same one that showed up that year at the MTV Music Awards with women chained like dogs as he came and appeared like a pimp? Motherfucker, no. You need to sit this one out. And you got your nerve. You got some motherfucking nerve to do that. That shit had me hot just watching it. So D Barnes, once again, shout out D Barnes. All right. Called out all the men who claim women are nasty and too sexual, and was like, do we have to go down the line of bullshit? We have to hear from men, essentially. She was like, it's fine when they're controlling it. And I was like, exactly. That's the issue. So just like white supremacist violence, it was fine as long as white people kill our children in the streets, shoot black women who need directions, or whose kids are enjoying their time at the swimming pool, or black men sitting on the passenger side of a vehicle and getting killed by the police, Philando Castile, okay? But when black people throw a cap up and defend themselves with their hands in a folding chair in Montgomery and now Detroit, y'all want to act like it's a problem. See, no. But that's what oppressive spaces do. And then for black men to do it to black women is shameful. But we talking about like a good 2 decades of reorganizing the mind around just supporting black men. They came in the 60s, 70s, and that whatever. So I personally wasn't crazy about WAP as a song, but Joan Morgan's point about one of the best parts of the song being that there were two independent, and when I say independent, I mean people who were separately famous, black women rappers who were very different, looked very different, sounded very different, but came together and embraced each other in their sexuality, as opposed to fighting and demeaning each other in the media, which had been typical because women were in constant competition with each other. And now that, and when she said that, and when I thought about it, I was like, yeah, that, you know what? That is important. And that was really skipped over. And it was in the media for weeks, and then people complained about the performance. Anyway, so the rapper Chica, once again, I don't know who these people are. I think I heard about Chica, if I'm remembering the person correctly. That's the one who was complaining about Zanique's baby on the plane or something. I don't know. Okay, I think that is her though. Talked about how black women, since the beginning of slavery, have been sexualized and demeaned. Facts. And then she says the good part is that black women in rap are now owning their sexuality, as opposed to somebody else owning it for them, and then they become, props and tools for other kinds of stuff. So, but then she made the point that now that people have found out that it sells, people are doing it, but they are not necessarily opening up markets for black women who do things differently, right? So it's still a very narrow space of making money. So now that the sexuality thing is a thing, women who enter the game feel like that's all they have to do in order to make music. They have to be overly sexual, so on and so forth, as opposed to saying, hey, we've had MC Lights, we've had Queen Latifah's, we have the rapper No Name, we have the Cardi B's. Like, they don't like to let us exist in, these kind of different spaces. And I agree with that. So then we get Cash Doll again. Cash Doll, whose name I just only randomly seen on the blogs. Cash Doll, this docuseries so far, I kind of fuck with you. I ain't gonna lie. So anyway, she said she was invited by people on Twitter, students, okay, to a high school pep rally because they had all these guys rapping, and people on Twitter asked her to come. She, whatever, she came, which is nice of somebody once they reach celebrity status. So she said she drove up there in a Hummer, and one of the students was mad and told her she couldn't come in because they had told her that she used to be a stripper. Never mind all the former fucking drug dealers, drug abusers, women beaters, and pedophiles that were rappers, okay? But all of a sudden this is an issue. Not she cleaned up her life, right? Anyway, so she pulled her Hummer, she said, up to the front of the school. She said, and I performed on top of the Hummer. The kids came outside and they watched me perform. She said, and then people were pissed. She was like, and I was laughing. She said, I was on the news and everything. When I tell y'all about them Detroit chicks in the last video, okay, they are something else. They don't play like that. All right, so then we get part 3, beautiful in your complexion. So they're talking about skin complexion and the beauty standard. And, the idea of colorism is the closer your skin appears to whiteness, the more beautiful you're considered. So they talk about, they show actually a picture of a casting call flyer from none other than the forever canceled, for me, okay? Forever canceled Kanye, Slavery Was a Choice West, okay? With his wild fucking ass when he sent out a call for multiracial women only. Multiracial women? Do you mean black and white women mix? Multiracial can look like lots of things. But anyway, I don't expect ignorant motherfuckers like that to know shit. So then they talk about how most women in music videos that have been casted are typically lighter skinned black women, or just non-black, right? Who are there to be seen as objects of desire. Objects, nevertheless. Agreed. However, I remember, and this came back, I told you there's going to be a lot of throwbacks to college, but I remember another conversation, and I remember the class. It was an introduction to Islam because I was not crazy about that class. Um, because my teacher, no, my professor was whatever. Okay, where some girls, we're talking about that, right? Like how lighter complexion women are always in the music videos. And I don't know how or what came up, but they were talking about that. Now, I didn't intervene in this particular discussion, and probably because it was before class, and I wasn't going to waste brain energy that I was going to need for that Tuesday, Thursday long class. Okay, I remember that much about it. But I remember even then thinking to myself, well, is this really a fight we want to have? I mean, they weren't fighting, but they were, discussing back and forth. I was like, do we really want to argue for darker skinned black women to be objectified in music videos equally with the lighter complexion ones so you can be objectified sexually in music videos, right? Now, I personally think we should keep the eyes on the prize, and that's tearing down the patriarchy. But sometimes those moments are cathartic when a group of women, are having a powwow in a conversation. So I just kept that thought to myself, but I'm sharing it with y'all years later. And I'm saying it on YouTube because I was just listening. But I had no interest in participating at the time. But I remember thinking, is that really the fight we want to have? Are we asking the right questions? Right? Are we asking is that really what we want? Yeah, we want, they only put light skin. And I understand the objects of desire and the way that plays on people's brains and the way we deal with black men, so on and so forth. And I still think at the root of a lot of this colorism shit, I don't care what anybody says, and yes, I have caught hell as a light-skinned black person, and you can get in the comments and tell me I don't get it. Bullshit. I've been black my whole life, okay? But I really do think at the core of it, we always see it's with black women. And I think a lot of it has to do with the competition black women have with each other, that they're competing for black men's attention. And so black men valuing lighter complexion women is really where the trauma, the hatred, and the pain comes. Because nobody really likes to be rejected. And because women are judged by completely different standards, I think that keeps that kind of pain going. But we have to really acknowledge that and not simply, really deal with these complex questions. So then they show ugly ass Kodak Black, who looks like one of the Garbage Pail Kids, talking about how he likes lighter skinned women and doesn't like girls with his complexion. If there was ever a perfect example of what it means to be a self-hating black person, that was it. That's all I needed. And I was like, what the fuck? And then they have this caramel complexion black woman who interviews him. And, because my idea of what's light and what's dark is very different, I think, than other people's. It's very subjective, okay, generally. But I was sitting up there like, sir, first of all, you're ugly. You're ugly regardless. There's nothing you could ever do, all right? And then two, I think what bothered me was the young lady was caramel complexion or whatever. I felt bad that she had to stand there, or felt like she had to stand there and be professional while he degraded and demeaned black women. She still had like a professional kind of smile, like, okay. But I just felt for her in that moment. And that kind of stuff, like, you don't even think twice that you are insulting this woman. To me, she didn't look light or dark, but, I'm not sure how she identified. She was certainly lighter than Kodak Black, but it just seemed like to me kind of that nervous smile, like, when can I get out of here? Like, that is self-hatred in a nutshell. And that shit was embarrassing as a black person to watch. Anyway, so we move on to Tierra Whack and Rhapsody, and they talk about the way they grew up. And Tierra was like, kids would call her tar baby and black as a street. And she didn't know how to defend herself verbally, because she had been shy and that kind of thing. So she said, I started fighting. And she said, I'm not proud of that. And I was thinking to myself, shit, you should be. You have to defend yourself. Fuck them. They know the next time they call somebody fucking tar baby and black as a street, fuck them. But I understand you're trying to set a good example, but you ain't got to set that good of one. Anyway, so then we have Rhapsody, who talked about she, despite being in a family that loved blackness, she still had her issues because of what the larger world projects. She didn't really go into detail about it, and I'm presuming because she grew up in a very rural part of North Carolina, I'm not really sure, what other black people were around and their numbers and that kind of thing. Anyway, now I was with Remy Ma, okay, when she said hip hop is part of the larger scheme of things, where people with more fair skin have an easier time than dark skinned women, with coarser hair, all the things, right? And then Chica talked about the amount of vitriol that was thrown at her. Like I said, I don't know much about her. I just know about Zonique and never mind. Vitriol thrown at her as she did her viral videos when she was first starting to rap. And she said people would say they like her music, but she would never be marketable because of her looks. And I was like, gosh, that's really hurtful. And ironically, she got the most attention for talking, and this is just my observation, the most I've ever heard about this girl is when she was talking shit about a light-skinned woman, Zonique, and her baby crying on an airplane, and her light-skinned mother, Tiny. Basically going at her on social media for complaining about it. I just think it's a little ironic that she's received vitriol virally, and then the most attention that even brought her into my kind of periphery, because I still don't know much about her, was when she did that. I'm just not saying that, one necessarily equals the other. I'm just saying it's a little ironic. That's all I'm saying. So then they start talking about how Lauryn Hill, though, broke the mold, right? More than any other female rap artist. And I kind of consider, I don't know, Lauryn Hill kind of a tour de force. Like, she's a rapper, but she can sing too. So I don't know. I just feel like she's so many things. But anyway, they were talking about how she was dark skinned with natural hair, like dreadlocks. I mean, she's drop dead gorgeous, and she's always been. They said she was on more covers than any rappers had ever been. Female rappers had been on. She was even on fashion magazines. Like, she just had this look that people fell in love with, and she was so beautiful, and she owned it. And considering her success and experiences, and I'm talking about Lauryn Hill, I think that's why some of us are so disappointed that we kind of feel like she walked away from music. I think because she gave a lot of people hope. Like, I've heard people complain that, after Miseducation Lauryn Hill, we didn't get no good music, this and the other. But I've never heard anybody say they didn't like Lauryn Hill's music. Right? Like, they just wanted more of it. Like, and I think now that I know that other part in terms of, because I remember seeing her in magazines, but it didn't really click to me, she's a dark singer, so this is a big deal. But I just remember, really admiring her, and I think that's probably why a lot of other people are disappointed. People have to live their life, though. Anyway, shout to Lauryn Hill. So part 4, falling into the trap. So we get 1992 to Brad. Who's that making that funky noise? Yes! I had forgotten. I had forgotten hearing those songs and shit. Cause that's like when I was like in kindergarten. But I remember the vibes. I had forgotten all about it. And it was just like all this nostalgia, all these good feelings started coming back. So she said she was like 2 different girls growing up. She grew up in Chicago, and she said on her dad's side of the family, she said she was allowed to be a tomboy. She could play with bugs. She could do wheelies on her bike. She said on her mom's side, she really, like a lot of people, was raised in part by her grandmother. And her grandmother was sanctified. And that typically is associated with, like, Pentecostals and the Church of God in Christ, the Kojic Church. So she said she could only listen to gospel music when she was with her. She said she couldn't cut her hair. She had to go to church every day. And that has to be a real back and forth, growing up. So she said when she saw MC Light and heard the song Self-Destruction, she said, I felt like that was me, right? Like, she saw herself in her. So she used to write poems as a kid. She said she tried to write poems to gospel music because she wasn't allowed to sing rap music. So she tried to write a rap for the Lord, okay, on Easter Sunday. So she said she was so proud of herself. She said after she did it, she said the church was quiet. Okay, she said it was cricket. She said, I think my grandmother got in trouble for me doing it. Now people play around with God all the time. Do y'all remember Erica Campbell's I Love God? When I saw that shit, I just thought it was a joke. I said somebody, must have photoshopped this and manipulated this. When I realized that was real, I said, baby, baby. Anyway, that people play with God way too much. Um, but okay. So she said she saw Chris Cross on In Living Color. And she was like, I just wanted to find out who their producer was. So she said she met Jermaine Dupri on the set of Oprah Winfrey. He was their producer. And I was like, there's a part of this story that seems to be missing. I mean, to be on the set of Oprah Winfrey ain't no small feat. I know you in Chicago, um, but you clearly had access to be just wondering who somebody's producer was, to meet them and be on the set of Oprah Winfrey to meet. That. Yeah, you. Yeah, you had a better life than most, Brad. So anyway, she said JD told her, when she had made her album or whatever, he didn't want her to be disappointed if she didn't go platinum. He said because females usually don't. So I'm just letting you know ahead of time. She was the first woman in rap to go platinum. I didn't know that. Then we get to Remy Ma. Remy Ma tells her story. So she's from the Bronx in the midst of the crack epidemic. And she said the kids, there were so many crack valves up and down the street. She said that they used to call them sprinkles. She said because they were different colors. So they would be picking them up not knowing. And she grew up in the projects and I was like, wow, I don't know, it just hurts my heart when I hear that. So her mother went to jail during a raid. And so she was like, I had to grow up really quick. She said 13, 14, 15, I was sleeping at different people's houses. I had to figure it out. And that's always when a parent goes to jail, family structure breaks down. And I don't even mean you didn't have both parents. Just not even having one parent around. It's hard. And lots of things happen to young ladies. They're especially vulnerable. And it was the same story when I heard of so many girls who lose family support, especially to the prison system, so on and so forth. So I'm going to give you another side eye. Because Remy Ma is talking about how Def Jam brought a van to school. First of all, a van. Okay, I'm sorry, but a van. And then it was Def Jam. So I know y'all could do better. And she was performing. And she said somehow she beat out the other girls and she made it into a record deal. And the van, something about the van didn't sit well with me. And Russell Simmons' rape allegations for multiple women. And him dating Kimora Lee Simmons, as we now know, from Kimora Lee's mouth, as a sophomore in high school in Missouri when he was pursuing her, and he was a big New York guy, but he's pursuing this high school kid in... Now, Remy Ma is the kind from the streets. She don't snitch, don't tell. And, maybe nothing did happen to her, but I'm sure she saw a lot. And that's all I'm going to say about that. So then they talked about how black women in rap who ended up in prison, the commentators, they were like, they never escaped the vulnerabilities of black women and black girls to prison, despite any monetary success. And they started listening to Remy Ma, Da Brat, Lauryn Hill, right? So Remy Ma was like, as a woman who was an ex-con, getting a second chance was difficult. She said nobody wanted to really work with her. And she said, this would have never affected a man that way. In fact, a man becomes more credible as a rap artist after he gets out of prison, right? And we saw that. Tupac didn't have to stop making albums. We've seen so many. The Game, man. We can go on for days, right? So, Remy Ma on Love and Hip Hop New York used it to kind of help revamp her image. And it worked to a large degree. I'm going to be honest, I didn't really like Remy Ma on that show or otherwise. I like Papoose. I like their relationship, but I thought their relationship worked because Papoose is just a good dude. But I just found her really kind of she just seemed unappreciative of a man like Papoose. And that's just me. But anyway, I still felt like she hadn't learned her lesson by the way she was ready to get in the fight sometimes on Love and Hip Hop with different people over bullshit. But Papoose, came in and saved that image a bit. So, but good for her. Da Brat got out of prison and ended up on reality TV too. So what I walked away with at the end of the episode is that reality TV has helped rehabilitate some careers of, ex-cons that we consider legends like the Brat. Anyway, so those are just my thoughts on that. I will talk to y'all soon. Like I told you, I'm gonna review the series because I'm really liking this. All right, see y'all soon. Bye.